Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's monthly product focus training. I'm Takendo, Deputy Manager of Product Management. I'm facilitating today's session. I'll be stepping in to guide us through the agenda. And today we have an exciting session planned. We'll be covering the FX25 series refresh by Mr. Chris Tubbs and IX family refresh by Mr. Nathan Moskal. The meeting is scheduled for 45 minutes total. And please feel free to post your questions in chat at any time during the presentation or hold them until our Q&A session at the end. So let's get started. Let me hand over to Mr. Chris Tubbs, please.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Tak. But yeah, like Tak said, this is actually a, and I mean, maybe not sound like a connector nerd or anything, but this is kind of an exciting session today. We've got some interesting stuff here and some new variations. So without further ado, we'll get going here. So the first one we're going to start with is our FX25 series. It's kind of follows suit with some of the other FX25s, the recent ones like say FX23s and some of the FX20 stuff. It is a 0.4 pitch. It's a very small connector. It's floating board to board. It is a right angle only connector. It has a floating design that can go 0.45 millimeters both in the X and Y. Does fairly decent high-speed transmissions at 2.5 gig, and some of the floating design lends itself to the self-alignment for easy connection when they're assembling the device or something. So it's FX25 again is kind of a very compact right angle 0.4 pitch floating range for increased reliability during manufacturing. It does support a pick and place on there, so it's it's fully automatic mounting. A lot of designs here are going to be compact designs, very tight spaces, or if they've got to get something up to an edge on it that we found. Some of the advantages of a floating design, and some of this today I'm going to maybe be going fairly quickly over, but we can definitely dive deeper into it offline on this, and we'd be happy to do. But you can ask any questions as we go along on this. So part of the advantage of floating design is that there still exists that a customer wants to put multiple connectors on a board, and generally it's not a wise practice to do, because if the connectors are not in the exact spot that they need to be, if one is kind of off center from the other one, it can maybe put stress on the connector, and it's gonna, when they go to mate the connectors, when two of them try to go together on it, if one of them's out of alignment, it's going to want to pull the other one on there, and it just kind of makes really a not good situation onto it. With the floating design, you can put multiple on the board, because as long as they're within the mounting tolerance of the connector, you're not going to have any stress placed on the connector, and it'll just be a straightforward assembly operation on them. But again, these go both in the X and Y 0.45 millimeters. There is no Z, which is the up and down, so the X and Y is left, right, front to back. But again, there's no Z tolerance on this, or Z float, I should say. The high-speed transmission with this does support, some of the older stuff with PCI Gen 1 and USB 2.0. It does use like a differential pair into it, and as you can kind of see here, it runs in a ground, signal, ground, signal, ground type arrangement to it. One success story that we did have with it, it was for a major camera manufacturer that they needed something. It had to be right angle. They didn't need power or anything onto it, but the way the connector was situated in there, they really, really needed something that would float to help them kind of with the assembly on it. And so Hirose came up with this FX25 solution for it. So it made, the whole everything, just getting the assembly, much easier to do with the floating design onto it. We do have some competitive analysis here. There is a company, KelDU, on these. They do have something that's similar to it, but from anything from Molex, TE, or Amphenol, they have no right angle in that. And we do have some slightly other benefits to it over the KEL part. The area, the occupied area on the board side is smaller. We do have a bigger floating range for it. And some of our usage temp goes down a little bit lower onto it. Right now, we only do have an 80 and a 110 spooled up in this. So it is somewhat bit limited on it. Application examples, we've already mentioned cameras. And I know probably in the US, we don't have a whole lot of like video and digital still camera stuff, design work that goes on. But we do have a lot of stuff that where we can sell this is maybe in security camera stuff. There's a lot of that. We have drones would be a great spot for that. Anything with like factory automation cameras or machine vision. And also one that we don't have on here, I'm thinking medical stuff would be a great a great application for maybe FX25 for the, the right customer and the right application on there. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on, like still or video cameras type stuff like that. Maybe some broadcasting we would get here, but probably definitely security cameras, drones, factory automation cameras, machine vision, and medical stuff might be, would be really good applications for this. Some of the customers that we've had, camera stuff, Kodak, Polaroid, drones. You can see here we've had some design-ins with some of this stuff already on here. So we're definitely getting the, the customers are out there that we can kind of, pitch these connectors to on that. But again, I know we don't have any medical on here, but I would definitely keep medical on the radar screen there for that. Is there any, before I jump into IX, is there any questions anyone has on FX25? Okay, if not, I will move on. So we're going to get onto the IX refresh, and then we're going to segue into an IX, some new offerings for IX on that. So for those of you that don't know, the IX is kind of an I/O connector that was made for industrial Ethernet applications. Typically, a lot of stuff we were seeing that the connectors were going into industrial type equipment, say CNC machines or other factory automation. They were using like RJ45 stuff in it. And most RJ45 stuff is not set up to handle the vibrations, maybe dust, dirt, oil mist, or any stuff like that. And it's kind of a bulky connector. And to some degree, most regular RJ45 stuff is fairly fragile on it. So Hirose came up with the IX industrial concept, and it would actually, I mean, it would be a somewhat of an understatement if I said, it was actually, well, it's a very, very successful Hirose connector on that. We've added options to it along the line, both the right angle, and we also have a jack in this, but kind of as the refresh. So the RJ45 connectors actually also took up quite a bit of room, and going to an IX solution to it, you could actually save almost about 48%. We had a sample board that had 3 IX connectors mounted in roughly the same area that one RJ45 was in. So they're very, very compact, they're much higher density, and they're a much more rugged connector than RJ45 typically would be. The IX on the board side and also on the plug side, they've got a metal shell that adds mechanical strength to this, so it reduces the load on the SMT leads. There's kind of through-hole legs or anchor legs that go into the board, so it's just not the, the solder tails that are keeping the thing on the board. The way the shell is designed on that, it's got high PCB retention force. You can kind of see there's a torsional kind of thing there, kind of a wrenching. It's resistant against that. And a lot of times when you are dealing with industrial type applications, they're not getting the most, gentlest of treatment. It does have a positive metal lock design onto it, so when it kind of snaps into place and everything, it's not going to vibrate loose or readily just pull out on that. So it's kind of an interesting connector. It solves a lot of problems. It does support up to 10 gig transmission speed. With the metal shell, it kind of keeps everything in. There's a couple of multi-point contacts on there. There's also a shield that grounds out to the shield cable. So pretty much it kind of, cancels out any crosstalk or any noise, EMI or anything like that with it. It does also support power over Ethernet, the PoE++, which is the highest power over Ethernet. And you can kind of see it here. So if customers need to do some of that stuff, they can do it with the Hirose iX series. There's a couple of different key variations on this. There's an A key, a B key, and a C key. So the way it kind of worked out, so iX actually has an IEC standard, so it's not like a Hirose unique, shape on it or anything. It actually has a real IEC standard, so it's it is a standard, it's not a unique one. So, but part of that was we kind of had to have by the standard, you had to have an A key that was maybe going to be used more and less for Ethernet communication, and then a B key for stuff that was non-Ethernet. There's also a C key that we've kind of gotten into for customers that needed to use both two connectors that were an Ethernet connection, but they didn't want to use the B key on it, even though all of the connectors will technically support any type of an Ethernet connection onto it. The A and C key are not necessarily any different than the B key. It just happens to be that the B key has got a different keying option to it. And you can kind of see some of where the keyings are different on each one of these. On the plug side or the cable side of the connector, the customer's got two options. They can go either a solder type on the iX40, and if they want to do IDC, which is by far the most popular, they are going to be using like the iX30 type or series like iX30, iX32, 31, and also the 35. All of these are going to vary just depending on the wire size onto it, and they are color coded, so there should be never, but the customer that on the wire holder portion of it, or the cable guide. So iX30s are going to be clear, iX31s are going to have a transparent yellow. The new one for iX35G is for 30 gauge. So that's a new addition to this, is going to be a red guide, and then it's also going to be for the 32 for 22 gauge is going to be the transparent blue color on there. So customers can tell at a glance which connector they're actually dealing with there. And it's actually a pretty easy connector to put together. The solder does take some time onto it, so they can go either again solder or IDC. Both of them have a number of shared parts, the shells and the top and bottom cover to it. So there's actually a minimum amount of parts on this. One thing on the cable assembly stuff, the IDC, even though it has more steps to it, it actually saves a lot of time onto it because of the soldering or the IDC termination versus the soldering onto it. So this is one of the reasons why the IDC is probably the more popular of the two methods right now. There is also a tool that Hirose sells, and for the IDC plug, it does the IDC termination on this, and it will also, you can kind of see, I don't know if actually I don't have you can see the top in the middle where it's under shared parts here. You can see the two metal shells on it. That metal shell the back side of it gets crimped onto the cable. The tool that Hirose sells for this will do both the IDC and that crimp for the shell onto the cable onto it in one tool. It's two operations, I believe, but it's just one tool, so there's not two tools needed for that. So new variations on this. One of the newest variations we've got is our field assembly plug. So much like I just talked about, if the customer did want to use the regular one, there is tooling needed for that. But on the field assembly plug, there might be instances of where, technicians or, they're not going to have the proper tooling or any tooling for it. So we came up with the field assembly plug. It doesn't take any dedicated tooling. They would use like pliers, maybe some parallel jawed pliers for it, or some other type of a clamping device that's going to, clamp down on the IDC portion to make that termination or make that the IDC on there. And then they just use some like pliers, long nose pliers, and they got to be careful to, and then they'll kind of shut or buckle down the strain relay for the back side of the connector onto the cable. The field assembly plug comes in a kind of a tray or a blister pack, and everything that they need is already in that tray, other than adding wire to it and having some, fairly simple tools to do the assembly of it. There's nothing else they need to have. Everything's going to come in that tray onto it. Right now, it is only available in an A and a B key. Also on the field assembly plug, so it kind of mitigates a little bit about, if they've got the correct or, different wire cable sizes. The back side of it kind of has a two-step or a three-step thing where they can actually ratchet down the amount of tension they have on that. So if it's a, ratchet once, you got the large click, it's going to click once, kind of the medium, it's going to go, you're going to get 2 clicks on it, and then it would click 3 times for the smallest diameter onto it. So it's actually pretty user friendly, and it's not going to be necessarily just, it's got to be this cable size. So it's kind of going to, adapt to what's there. There is going to be a range. There's a limit on what it can do. And as long as they're within that limit, the cable, should work just fine with it. So one of the things that has been an asked for requirement or an asked for option on IX is kind of a waterproof version of these. By the way, the way the connector is actually designed, it made it really, really hard to waterproof it because there's like push buttons on the thing to unlatch the connector. And it got into a thing of like, well, how do you seal that up without kind of reinventing the wheel? And so Hirose kind of came up with an idea that would work that still uses existing parts, and it's fairly simple to do it. It is IP65, excuse me, and 67. It is a push-pull lock on this, and we'll get into that about how it works and everything, whereas the other one, the regular IX kind of uses, there's a latching mechanism that you got to release. It will work with all receptacles, any of the IX receptacles that Hirose makes, it will work with that. And it does, again, a wide range of cables. So the gasket in the design adds the water and a dust proofing for reliability in harsh environments. Like I had said earlier, sometimes, maybe it's factory automation where they've got maybe there's some type of dust in the air just from the assembly or manufacturing process, or maybe if it's in machining, some machines, and that might be a problem on it. So something like this is going to safeguard against any failures or anything by being able to be waterproofed. It is an A key and a B key. Again, A key for Ethernet type communications, and the B key stuff would be for non-Ethernet. So it uses, actually here, so we use there's the cable side connector, there's the seal, what Hirose calls the seal portion, and then kind of the inset illustration here kind of brings all three of them together. And I'll get, the seal portion is more or less just kind of like a portal between the panel and the receptacle, and kind of a place where the connector, the cable side, can basically hook into. And I'll show this in a moment. So the waterproof version, we do have a high density, and there's kind of an orientation flexibility that you can do on this. So as you can see here, kind of on the left-hand side, we've got the kind of that portal that I was telling you, the seal portion of it. That portion does not have the connector or the receptacle side in it. So the customer would still have to use a regular IX connector on the board, but that regular the receptacle side would go through the panel and kind of come into the seal portion of it on that. So there's actually three pieces there that they've got to get into. Kind of the cutout design that we've done on this, you can kind of see where it kind of fits into kind of a puzzle piece type of a situation. So one of the reasons here for high density mounting, instead of if you just had two ears on the connector, one at the 9 o'clock, one at 3 o'clock, it would take up, more space. And so since the design for the seal portion of this has been kind of nested, it kind of brings them in closer together, and it reduces the amount of space used for it, so you can get high density mounting with this. But the idea on the right-hand side here is that we're getting everything will work either if you're using the vertical, like IX80 part, some of the right angles, or even the upright right angle part. It will work with all of those parts. It does use a push-pull, and it has a secondary lock onto it. So there's a couple of different pieces here to it, but once the cable assembly is made, it just kind of goes in there, and you push the hood forward onto it, and then the security clip, there's kind of like a rotating lock that locks it down, and it will lock the connector in place. So again, it's beneficial for industrial applications where you don't want the thing coming apart or anything like that onto it. And to get it out, you would just have to rotate that security clip or that ring back up, toward the 12 o'clock position. And then it would unmate from there. It supports both 22, 24, 26, 28. The only thing you got to be careful of is that they are different connectors. So if the customer is using 22, 24, they've got to use the one that's set up for 22, 24 or 26, 28. There's also an optional dust cap for the panel side, and also on the cable side connector as well. So that is a new variation for our IX waterproof. Some of the stuff by pitching some of the IX, it's going to be a very compact, robust, shielded connector. And it has proved, we've had it, in the lineup now for a number of years, probably, I'd have to say maybe 9 years easily. It's proven itself. It does support high-speed transmission. I'll do that 10 gig, has high resistance to EMI. And like with anything on that Hirose does, part of the selling point to a lot of Hirose stuff typically is that we've got a lot of variation to stuff, and that lends itself really well to the customer being able to tailor it to their application on this. And the IX is no different on it. It's like we've got, the straight plugs, we've got right angle plugs, bend up, bend down onto it. We've got the waterproof version, the receptacle side, you can go with the flat one, you can go with the vertical or the right angle flag type, we call it, which kind of on edge. So there's a lot of different variation that, the customer can use to go, this combination is going to work perfect here in this application onto it. And it's a lot of that variety that allows them to do that from Hirose. Some of the success stories, I know we've had a number of stuff with factory automation on this, but a lot of network connections, encoders, definitely factory automation stuff. We've seen some other stuff with the connector being used in infotainment, in some aviation type stuff, and also handheld devices that for like go into restaurants. We had a customer recently that is using IX where they make a product that it basically, think of it as like you would go into a coffee shop or something like that, and there would be literally a tablet on the table and you can sit there and order what you want. And they're actually using an IX on that device to basically hook or hard wire into the system there in the coffee shop. So they've proven themselves in a wide range of applications. Some of the other applications here, we've kind of color coded this. Some of our sealed ones, like the waterproof we talked about, are going to be food processing, large screen video type stuff. Anytime you're going to get maybe dust or anything on that, the food processing stuff, maybe if they're hosing it down with, like pressure washers or something, you would want to use the waterproof on those, but the light blue for everything else, like, can definitely be used, factory automation, machine vision, industrial robots, surveillance cameras. But I mean, if the customer wanted to use a waterproof in one of those, they can definitely do it. Just have to be making sure you can fit it into the design. But green, definitely the green are the sealed ones for food and, maybe large screen video stuff. Some example customers here, it's not limited to these, but it'd be customers like these companies that I know you might not have, like, a Galil or a Radwell or, a Mazak in your territory, but if you can kind of see some of these, Mazak typically is a, big CNC machine company, FLIR for some of the security cameras type stuff. So you might not have a FLIR in your territory, but there might be another security type camera company in your territory, and this would be, someplace that you'd want to at least show them these types of connectors. The newer IX waterproof is in our regular IX catalog, so it's not a standalone catalog, but it does begin on page 24 in the regular IX catalog. And again, everything else that we've talked about today on IX, all the different options, all the receptacle sides, all the different keying options, and all the cable side connectors are in that IX waterproof. So, and I think one last note, I don't know do you want to talk about this, Pete, or do you want me to?
Oh, let me do that. So,
okay.
We are kind of restocking those products in the sample portal, and including those shown on the slide. The newly added product FX26 is now available on the sample portal. So just please be noted. And FX76 is let me see.
Do you need me to stop sharing TAC?
Yes, please. FX26. Yes. So FH76, can you see the screen?
Yes.
This is a very narrow pitch, 0.175 millimeter, and very low profile, 0.5 millimeter height, one action lock connector. And we believe this is going to be a great addition to Hirose portfolio. And the good news is now it's available on the sample portal. So yeah, that's it. And thank you, Chris, for your presentation. And does anyone has any questions overall about FX25 or IEX series family edition, and any other questions?